Hi friends. Many of you already know me. I'm Rachel. I'm the theologian in residence here at North Decatur. But what most of you probably don't yet know about me is that in my minimal free time, I participate in this medieval recreation organization. One of the main things that I do in this group is the armored combat. So since Patrick talked about the armor of God this week, I thought I'd give you a tour of my armor kit and show you some of the things that I've learned about war metaphors in the Bible from having my own armor. Now, my armor is an ancient Roman style, but the point still stands. Your breastplate is your largest piece of protection. The author of Ephesians calls that big piece of protection righteousness. And how is righteousness supposed to protect you? Well, we vow to protect one another and ourselves from injustice and the things that try to tear us apart in this world. And one of the things that helps keep us together is righteousness. Righteousness is something that we spend our whole lives working on. This piece of armor took 16 hours just to weave the chainmail together. It's even something that requires maintenance. You can already see places where I need to repair the chainmail. We need to continually keep working in community together on becoming ever better. This is a very Wesleyan concept. We're always moving onward toward perfection. Now, your belt, the author of Ephesians calls truth. Truth is hard to explain because every culture has a different meaning for capital T truth. Some mean some kind of absolute truth about the universe. Some mean some sort of profound wisdom. Some mean deep knowledge. For us as Christians, it's got to have something to do with God, right? Whether it's knowledge of God, experience of God, wisdom from God. That's the thing that holds up your armor. Armor weighs a lot, but between it being distributed on your shoulders and being held up by a belt, that takes a lot of the pressure off of you and helps you keep going longer than you could have otherwise. The other thing about belts is that belts are a lot of times where people wear the symbols of people that they serve or people that they love. And that's the first piece of subversion in this metaphor. The author of Ephesians loves irony. The irony of talking about God in terms of armor when people would have first thought of the Roman army that conquered them and destroyed their temple in the year 70 when they heard of armor. It's a weird metaphor to choose, but part of the reason is that telling us that we have the power to fight in some way, even if we can't physically stand up against the Romans, it takes away just a little bit of that fear that comes from the image of the conquering Roman army. We don't belong to Caesar. We belong to God, and that's whose favor we wear on our belts. Now, I don't know anybody who puts their shoes on after they put on their armor, but we'll go with it. The author of Ephesians says that for shoes, you should take anything that will make you ready to preach the gospel of peace. Again, pretty ironic when you're standing in armor, telling people that the essence of the gospel is peace. But the earliest followers of Jesus called the church the way. And you need good shoes to walk a lifetime on the way. Everybody has something different that holds them up. Ephesians alludes to that. It's whatever it takes to make you ready to preach the gospel of peace. Whether that's your favorite book, your best friend, your morning coffee, whatever it is that keeps you going, that serves as your foundation and reminds you that ultimately the good news of God is about peace and a fullness of life for everyone, not just the people in power, like the people who would normally be wearing armor in the Roman world, but everyone. And your shoes are whatever it takes to keep you always working down that path. Now, the next thing that the author of Ephesians talks about is your shield, which he calls faith. And I think this is one of the coolest parts of the passage. See, a lot of times when people talk about faith, they talk about it like it's this thing that has to be kept pristine or it doesn't work right. But I don't think that's ever been true. And Ephesians testifies to that. So here's the thing about shields. They can get dented a lot. They can get chipped and torn up and still work perfectly. When we think of people in armor nowadays, we tend to think of the sort of valiant solo tournament style But the author of Ephesians is thinking about an actual battle where people would have been lined up, shield next to shield, next to shield, next to shield, and you would have had people next to you, forming a shield wall. Which means that even if your shield does break, there are people on either side of you to fill that gap and help protect you. That's the thing about faith, is that we're part of a community, whether online or in person, that helps hold each other up. Sometimes we just can't really believe anything, and that's okay. That's what the rest of us are here for. That's what the shield of faith is about. It's about how resilient faith is and how much we need each other to keep us going. And the helmet, then, is about how much we need God. Your head takes the most shots in a battle, so your helmet needs to be good. But it's really tough to make these. I don't know how. And most of the people I know who made their own armor made everything except their helmet. Now, the author of Ephesians calls the helmet salvation, and I think that's pretty telling. See, salvation is the thing that we can't make for ourselves. It's the gift that God gives us. We might call it the helmet of grace. All we can do is accept it and wear it. Whatever it is that salvation means to you, that's the thing that keeps your head on straight when you've been marching and marching and marching along the way, and you don't quite know where you're going anymore. God is still there, holding us together even when we don't know it or feel it. The last thing that the author of Ephesians mentions is the sword, which he calls the Word of God. Now, if we think back to what Jesus said about the Word, he says that ultimately all of the law and the prophets come down to two commandments: to love God with everything we have, and to love one another the way we love ourselves. And if we think of that as what this is, I think it makes sense. See, here's the thing. In a battle, your sword is as much defense as it is offense. Probably even more. See, between your shield and your sword, most of you is covered. So between the faith that we help hold up for each other and the love that we cultivate for God and for each other, that's the thing that keeps us safe from injustice and oppression. Now, that doesn't mean that injustice and oppression will never come at us, or even that it will never get a shot in edgewise. But it does mean that we're not powerless to stop it. That's the thing that the author of Ephesians is saying. When the Roman army comes a-conquering, it feels like they're the only people that have any power. And yet, we aren't without some kind of power. Even if it doesn't look quite like what the Romans say power should look like. We have each other to try to be better, and to try to make the world better, and to stand up to injustice, and to resist oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. So, this is my armor. I hope you liked it. Have a good week, everyone.